Welcome to Stoic Vivu, where ancient wisdom meets modern life. I'm here to help you transform your character and build the unshakable foundation that will make you unstoppable in everything you pursue. Our mission is to take the timeless principles of Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca and show you exactly how to apply them through daily habits that will revolutionize who you become. Let me ask you something that cuts to the heart of personal growth. What's the difference between people who talk about becoming better and people who actually transform their lives? What separates those who read inspiring quotes from those who embody inspiring character? What makes some individuals unshakable in the face of adversity while others crumble under pressure? The answer isn't talent, luck, or circumstances. It's character. And character isn't something you're born with. It's something you build through daily habits, one choice at a time. The ancient Stoics understood something that modern psychology is just beginning to confirm. Your character literally determines your destiny. Not your education, your connections, or your natural abilities, though these matter. Your character shapes how you respond to opportunities, how you handle setbacks, how you treat other people, and ultimately what kind of life you create. Think about the people you most admire. Whether they're historical figures, contemporary leaders, or someone in your own life, what you're really admiring is their character. Their integrity under pressure, their courage in difficult moments, their consistency in living their values, their ability to grow from failures instead of being destroyed by them. Here's what most people miss. Character isn't built in moments of crisis. It's built in thousands of small, seemingly insignificant daily choices. How you respond when someone cuts you off in traffic. Whether you keep your commitments when you don't feel like it. How you treat people who can't do anything for you. Whether you choose the easy path or the right path when no one is watching. The Stoics believed that every single day presents you with opportunities to strengthen or weaken your character. Every interaction, every decision, every response to adversity is character training. Most people let these moments pass without conscious thought. But what if you approached each day as an opportunity to deliberately build the character you want to have? Today, you're going to learn 7 specific habits that will transform not just what you do, but who you are. These aren't abstract philosophical concepts, but concrete daily practices that have been tested by some of history's most remarkable individuals. From Roman emperors to American presidents, from ancient philosophers to modern leaders, these habits have created unshakable character in people who faced impossible challenges. By the end of this video, you'll have a complete system for character development. You'll know exactly how to approach each day as an opportunity for growth, how to learn from everyone you meet, and how to build the kind of character that makes you unstoppable regardless of what life throws at you. The ancient Stoics taught that philosophy isn't meant to be studied but lived. Today, we're going to prove they were right. Are you ready to transform your character and become unstoppable? Habit 1. Choose to wear out, never rust out. Picture a frail, asthmatic child in 1860s New York who can barely climb a flight of stairs without gasping for breath. Doctors tell his wealthy family that he'll likely live a quiet, sedentary life due to his weak constitution. Most families would accept this diagnosis and arrange their child's life around his limitations. But Theodore Roosevelt's father looked at his sickly son and said something that would change American history. "Theodore, you have the mind, but you have not the body, and without the help of the body, the mind cannot go as far as it should. You must make your body." What happened next was a masterclass in Stoic character development. Young Theodore made a choice that would define not just his physical health, but his entire approach to life. He decided he would rather wear out than rust out. He would rather push his body to its limits and risk failure than accept a life of comfortable limitation. Roosevelt threw himself into physical training with the intensity of a warrior preparing for battle. His father installed a gymnasium in their home, and Theodore spent hours daily building the body that nature had denied him. He learned to box, to ride horses, to hike mountains. When he went to Harvard, he continued this relentless pursuit of physical excellence. When he moved to the Dakota Territory, he lived the strenuous life of a cowboy, facing dangers that would have terrified most men of his social class. This wasn't just about fitness, it was about character. Roosevelt understood something the ancient Stoics taught. How you do anything is how you do everything. The discipline he built in the gymnasium carried over into his studies, his writing, his political career, and his leadership as president. He had chosen to wear out rather than rust out, and that choice shaped every aspect of his life. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his personal journal while leading the Roman Empire through plague and war, captured this same principle. At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. What do I have to complain of? If I'm going to do what I was born for, the things I was brought into the world to do. This is the first habit of unshakable character. Choosing action over comfort, growth over safety, engagement over withdrawal. Every single day, life presents you with the same choice Roosevelt faced as a sickly child. You can choose the path of least resistance, the comfortable option, the safe route. Or you can choose to push yourself, to grow, to engage fully with the challenges and opportunities in front of you. Let's say you're working in a Denver office building, and every day you take the elevator to your 5th floor workplace. It's convenient, it's what everyone does, and there's nothing wrong with it. But what if you chose to take the stairs? Not because you have to, but because you're committed to wearing out rather than rusting out. That simple choice, repeated daily, begins to build something in you beyond physical fitness. It builds the habit of choosing the harder path when it serves your growth. Seneca, who faced political exile and loss of fortune multiple times, understood this principle deeply. He wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." When you choose to wear out rather than rust out, you're ending the version of yourself that accepts limitation and beginning the version that pushes beyond it. This habit applies to every area of your life. In your career, it means taking on challenging projects rather than coasting in your comfort zone. In your relationships, it means having difficult conversations rather than avoiding conflict. In your personal growth, it means reading challenging books, learning new skills, and pushing your mental boundaries just as Roosevelt pushed his physical ones. Here's the daily practice. Each morning, identify one area where you can choose to wear out rather than rust out. Maybe it's doing that workout you've been postponing. Perhaps it's having that difficult conversation with your colleague. It could be tackling the most challenging task on your to-do list first instead of procrastinating with easier items. The key is understanding what Roosevelt and the Stoics knew. You don't get stronger by avoiding strain. You don't build character by choosing comfort. You don't develop resilience by living a life without challenges. Your character is like a muscle, it only grows when it's challenged beyond its current capacity. Roosevelt's transformation from sickly child to rough rider, from privileged young man to president who could handle any crisis, didn't happen overnight. It happened through thousands of daily choices to push himself rather than protect himself, to engage rather than withdraw, to wear out rather than rust out. The ancient Stoics believed that virtue is the only true good, and virtue requires action. You can't be courageous without facing something that scares you. You can't be disciplined without choosing the hard path over the easy one. You can't be resilient without encountering and overcoming resistance. Epictetus, who understood physical limitation as someone who had been enslaved and disabled, taught that no one can hurt you without your permission. When you choose to wear out rather than rust out, you're refusing to give life permission to diminish you. You're claiming your power to grow stronger through every challenge. Roosevelt lived this principle until the very end. Even after being shot during a campaign speech, he insisted on finishing his presentation before seeking medical attention. He had so thoroughly internalized the habit of engagement over withdrawal that even a bullet couldn't make him choose rust over wear. The question isn't whether you'll face challenges, setbacks, and difficult choices. You will. The question is whether you'll meet them with the spirit of someone who chooses to wear out or someone who chooses to rust out. Your character depends on this choice, and you make it new every single day. Roosevelt's choice to wear out rather than rust out demonstrates how each decision shapes the foundation of who we become through our character. Habit 2. Build your character through every choice. Imagine you're managing a retail store in Phoenix during the busy holiday season when a customer returns an expensive jacket that's clearly been worn multiple times. The tags are gone. There's a faint stain on the sleeve, and it smells like cigarette smoke. Your store policy clearly states no returns on worn items, but this customer is getting increasingly aggressive, threatening to post negative reviews online and never shop here again. Your assistant manager quietly suggests you could simply process the return to avoid the scene. It would be easy, just click a few buttons, give the customer their money back, and move on. No one would question it, your district manager would never know, and you'd avoid an unpleasant confrontation. Besides, it's just one jacket, and the company can absorb the loss. In this moment, you're facing what the ancient philosopher Heraclitus called the most important truth about human existence. Character is fate. This isn't just a philosophical saying. It's a practical reality playing out in your store right now. The choice you make about this return jacket isn't just about company policy or customer service. It's about who you are and who you're becoming. The Stoics understood that every single choice you make either builds or erodes your character. There are no neutral moments, no inconsequential decisions. When you choose integrity over convenience, courage over comfort, principle over profit, you're literally sculpting the person you're becoming. When you choose the opposite, you're chipping away at the foundation of who you want to be. Marcus Aurelius, who made life and death decisions daily as Roman emperor, wrote in his personal journal, "The best revenge is not to be like that." He understood that every choice is a choice about character. Every time he chose justice over expediency, mercy over cruelty, truth over political advantage, he was building the character that would define his legacy. In your Phoenix store, this customer return is a character-building moment disguised as a business transaction. If you process the fraudulent return, you're choosing short-term ease over long-term integrity. You're teaching yourself that principles are negotiable when they become inconvenient. You're building the character of someone who compromises their standards under pressure. But if you politely but firmly uphold the store policy, you're choosing differently. You're building the character of someone who maintains their principles even when it's difficult. You're practicing the habit of doing what's right rather than what's easy. You're strengthening the part of yourself that can be trusted to make good decisions even when no one is watching. Seneca, who navigated the dangerous politics of imperial Rome, understood this deeply. He wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." Each time you choose character over convenience, you're ending the version of yourself that compromises under pressure and beginning the version that stands firm in your principles. Here's what most people miss. Your character isn't built in dramatic moments of crisis. It's built in small, everyday choices that seem insignificant at the time. How you handle the return jacket, whether you keep your word when it becomes inconvenient, how you treat people who can't help your career, whether you tell the truth when a lie would be easier. These moments shape who you become far more than any major life decision. The Stoics developed a specific practice for this called character choice awareness. Before making any decision, ask yourself, what kind of person does this choice make me? Not what's the easiest option or what will cause the least conflict, but what kind of character am I building through this choice? When you apply this to the customer return situation, the answer becomes clear. Processing the fraudulent return makes you someone who compromises their principles when pressured. Upholding the policy makes you someone who maintains their integrity even when it's difficult. The choice isn't really about the jacket, it's about your character. Epictetus, who understood powerlessness as someone who had been enslaved, taught that some things are within our power, while others are not. You can't control whether the customer gets angry, whether they post negative reviews, or whether they shop elsewhere. But you have complete control over your response, and your response is what builds your character. Consider how this principle applies beyond retail situations. When your colleague takes credit for your idea in a meeting, do you speak up or stay silent? When you see someone being treated unfairly, do you intervene or look away? When you make a mistake that no one else knows about, do you acknowledge it or hope it goes unnoticed? Each choice is a vote for the kind of person you're becoming. The remarkable thing about character building is that it compounds over time. Each good choice makes the next good choice easier. Each time you choose integrity, courage, or compassion, you're strengthening those qualities within yourself. You're building what the Stoics called inner citadel, an unshakable core that remains steady regardless of external circumstances. This doesn't mean being rigid or perfectionist. It means being intentional about the character you're building through your daily choices. Marcus Aurelius faced countless decisions as emperor, from military strategy to domestic policy to personal relationships. What made him great wasn't that he never made mistakes, but that he consistently chose based on virtue rather than convenience. Try this practice immediately. For the next week, before making any significant choice, pause and ask yourself, what kind of character am I building through this decision? Notice how this simple question changes your decision-making process. Notice how it makes you more conscious of the person you're becoming through your choices. Your character truly is your fate because it determines how you respond to everything life brings you. When you build strong character through consistent good choices, you become someone who can handle any challenge, who can be trusted in any situation, who can find the right path even when it's difficult to see. Understanding that character determines destiny naturally leads us to the most important insight about personal transformation. The time for talking about change is over. Habit 3. Be the change instead of just talking about it. Set the scene. You're a software engineer working at a tech company in Seattle, and for months, you've been passionate about environmental issues. You post regularly on social media about climate change, share articles about corporate responsibility, and engage in heated debates with friends about sustainable practices. You've attended virtual seminars, read dozens of articles, and can articulate the problems facing our planet with impressive detail and passion. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Despite all your posting, sharing, and debating, your actual lifestyle hasn't changed much. You still drive to work alone instead of taking public transit. You still order takeout in disposable containers several times a week. You still buy fast fashion and replace electronics frequently. You talk passionately about change, but haven't actually changed. This disconnect between what you advocate and how you live represents one of the most common character failures of our time. We've become experts at discussing virtue without practicing it, at identifying problems without solving them, at inspiring others while remaining uninspired ourselves. Marcus Aurelius understood this trap when he wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." This wasn't just advice for others. It was a reminder he wrote to himself in his private journal. Even as the most powerful person in the Roman Empire, someone who could command others to change, he recognized that the only person he could truly control was himself. The Stoics believed that philosophy isn't an intellectual exercise but a way of life. They weren't interested in winning debates about virtue. They were interested in embodying virtue. They understood that talking about courage doesn't make you courageous, discussing discipline doesn't make you disciplined, and advocating for justice doesn't make you just. Think about the people who have most influenced your life. Were they the ones who talked eloquently about important principles, or were they the ones who quietly lived those principles? Almost certainly it was the latter. The teacher who stayed late to help struggling students instead of just talking about education. The parent who showed love through actions rather than just words. The colleague who demonstrated integrity in small daily choices rather than just discussing ethics. Your environmental concern in Seattle presents a perfect opportunity to practice this third habit. Instead of spending another evening debating climate policy online, what if you spent that time researching public transit routes to work? Instead of sharing another article about corporate waste, what if you started bringing your own containers for takeout? Instead of posting about sustainable fashion, what if you committed to buying no new clothes for 6 months? Seneca, who lived through the decadent excesses of imperial Rome while maintaining his own philosophical principles, wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." When you choose to embody your values rather than just advocate for them, you're ending the version of yourself that talks about change and beginning the version that creates change. This habit requires brutal honesty about the gap between your stated values and your actual behavior. Most people avoid this examination because it's uncomfortable to see how far their actions fall short of their ideals. But the Stoics embraced this discomfort as the starting point for genuine growth. Here's the daily practice. Choose one value you care deeply about and identify one specific action you can take today to embody it. If you value health, don't just post about the importance of exercise, go for a walk. If you value community, don't just discuss social problems, volunteer for an hour. If you value learning, don't just share articles about education, read a challenging book for 30 minutes. The key insight is this: small, consistent actions in alignment with your values are infinitely more powerful than grand gestures or passionate speeches. The Seattle engineer who takes public transit twice a week is creating more positive environmental impact than someone who shares 100 articles about climate change but changes nothing about their own behavior. Epictetus, who had experienced firsthand the difference between words and actions as someone who had been enslaved, taught that don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. People will judge you not by what you say you believe, but by how you actually live. Your character is revealed through your choices, not your conversations. Consider how this applies across different areas of your life. If you value honesty, practice it in small moments, admitting when you don't know something instead of pretending you do. If you value compassion, show it through specific actions, checking on a struggling friend rather than just thinking about them. If you value excellence, demonstrate it in your work rather than just talking about high standards. The ancient Stoics discovered something that modern psychology confirms. Identity follows behavior. When you consistently act like the person you want to become, you gradually become that person. When you consistently act contrary to your stated values, those values become meaningless. Marcus Aurelius faced this challenge constantly as emperor. He could have spent his time writing treatises on justice, giving speeches about virtue, or debating philosophy with court intellectuals. Instead, he focused on governing justly, making virtuous decisions, and living philosophically. His meditations weren't written for publication. They were private reminders to himself to embody his principles. This doesn't mean you should never discuss important issues or advocate for causes you believe in. But it means recognizing that your actions carry infinitely more weight than your words. People are inspired more by what you do than by what you say about what you should do. Try this immediately. Identify the biggest gap between your stated values and your actual behavior. Choose one small, specific action you can take this week to close that gap. Don't announce it on social media. Don't tell friends about your new commitment. Just do it quietly and consistently. The remarkable thing about embodying your values is that it creates a positive feedback loop. The more you act in alignment with your principles, the stronger those principles become. You develop what the Stoics called character strength, the ability to do what's right even when it's difficult, inconvenient, or unrewarded. As we embody our values, we become ready for one of the most powerful habits that separates truly wise people from those who think they know everything. Habit 4. Learn something valuable from every person you meet. Visualize this. You're a high-powered executive in Atlanta's financial district, rushing to catch an elevator after a challenging board meeting. As the doors begin to close, the building's janitor, an older man named Carlos who's worked there for 15 years, steps in with his cleaning cart. Your immediate instinct is to check your phone, review your notes, or mentally rehearse your next presentation. After all, what could you possibly learn from someone whose job is so different from yours? But what if you made a different choice? What if you looked up from your phone and simply said, "Carlos, you've been here longer than anyone. What's the biggest change you've seen in this building? What you discover might surprise you." Carlos tells you about the patterns he's noticed in successful executives versus those who flame out. He shares insights about company culture that no consultant could provide. He mentions which departments work late consistently and which ones seem most stressed. In those 3 minutes, you learn more about your own company's dynamics than you did in your hour-long strategy meeting. You discover that Carlos has been observing leadership patterns, employee behaviors, and organizational changes with the keen eye of someone who sees everything but is rarely asked for his perspective. This encounter illustrates what Epictetus understood when he taught, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." The ancient Stoics believed that wisdom isn't concentrated in certain people or positions. It's distributed everywhere, waiting to be discovered by those humble enough to look for it. Most people approach interactions with a hierarchy in their minds. They listen carefully to their boss, pay attention to experts in their field, and respect the opinions of people with impressive credentials. But they tune out the receptionist, ignore the delivery driver, and dismiss the insights of anyone whose job title seems less important than theirs. This isn't just social snobbery, it's intellectual poverty. Marcus Aurelius, despite being the most powerful person in the Roman Empire, made it his practice to learn from everyone around him. He learned military strategy from his generals, but he also learned patience from dealing with difficult senators, resilience from watching common soldiers endure hardship, and practical wisdom from observing how ordinary citizens solved everyday problems. The Stoics understood something that modern research confirms. Expertise is domain-specific, but wisdom is universal. The barista who's perfected the art of remaining calm during the morning rush has developed emotional regulation skills you can apply to high-pressure business situations. The maintenance worker who troubleshoots complex building systems has developed problem-solving approaches that could revolutionize how you handle project challenges. Here's the daily practice that will transform how you see every interaction. Approach each person you meet with genuine curiosity about what they know that you don't. This isn't fake interest or manipulative networking. It's the humble recognition that every person has mastered something you haven't. When you're waiting in line at the grocery store, instead of scrolling through your phone, observe how the cashier handles difficult customers. What techniques do they use to de-escalate tension? How do they maintain efficiency while remaining friendly? These are skills that apply to every area of life, but most people miss these learning opportunities because they're not paying attention. Seneca, who moved between the highest levels of Roman society and the practical world of business, wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. When you begin seeing every person as a potential teacher, you end the arrogance that limits your learning to formal educational settings or people with impressive titles. Consider your Uber driver who's worked in the city for 10 years. They know traffic patterns, understand neighborhood dynamics, and have observed economic changes firsthand. Your child's teacher has mastered the art of explaining complex concepts in simple terms and managing multiple personalities simultaneously. Your elderly neighbor has lived through economic cycles, relationship challenges, and health scares that have taught them lessons you'll eventually need. The key is asking the right questions. Instead of, "How was your day?" try, "What's the most interesting thing you've learned in your work this week?" Instead of making small talk about the weather, ask, "What do you wish more people understood about what you do?" Instead of staying silent during service interactions, inquire, "What's the most challenging part of your job, and how do you handle it?" Epictetus, who had experienced life from the perspective of both slavery and freedom, taught that no one can hurt you without your permission. When you approach every interaction as a learning opportunity, you give yourself permission to grow from every encounter. You stop wasting the wisdom that surrounds you daily. This habit requires setting aside your ego and embracing what the Stoics called intellectual humility. You have to admit that the person serving your coffee might know something about customer service that could improve your leadership style. You have to acknowledge that the person fixing your car might understand problem solving in ways that could enhance your analytical skills. The ancient Stoics believed that wisdom is like water. It flows everywhere, but only those who create containers can collect it. Your humility and curiosity are the containers that allow you to collect wisdom from every interaction. Try this immediately. For the next week, have one genuine learning conversation with someone whose job or life experience is completely different from yours. Ask them about their expertise, their challenges, and their insights. Listen not to be polite, but to discover what they know that you don't. What you'll discover is that learning from everyone doesn't just expand your knowledge. It expands your character. It develops empathy, humility, and appreciation for the diverse forms of human excellence. It teaches you that intelligence and wisdom appear in countless forms, many of which you've been overlooking. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, "Be like the rocky headland on which the waves constantly break. It stands firm, and round it the seething waters are laid to rest." When you learn from everyone, you become like that headland, stable in your character but constantly enriched by the experiences that flow around you. Learning from everyone teaches us something crucial about where we should focus our mental energy and attention. Habit 5. Focus on your effort. Release the outcome. Consider this scenario. You're an artist living in Houston, and after months of preparation, you've finally secured a meeting with the city's most prestigious gallery owner. You've spent countless hours perfecting your portfolio, crafting your artist statement, and rehearsing your presentation. This could be the breakthrough that launches your career, the exhibition that gets you noticed, the opportunity that validates years of struggling to make it as a professional artist. The meeting arrives and you give the presentation of your life. Your work is polished, your passion is evident, and your vision is clear. The gallery owner listens attentively, asks thoughtful questions, and seems genuinely interested. You leave feeling confident and excited, already imagining your opening night reception and the reviews that will follow. 3 weeks later, you receive the rejection email. Despite your excellent presentation, they've decided to go with a different artist whose work better fits their current vision. Your heart sinks. All that preparation, all that hope, all that effort seemingly wasted. You find yourself questioning your talent, your career choice, even your worth as an artist. This is where most people make a critical error. They measure the value of their effort by the outcome it produces. Because the gallery said no, they conclude their work wasn't good enough. Because they didn't get the result they wanted, they believe their effort was meaningless. Epictetus, who understood the fundamental distinction between what we control and what we don't, taught something revolutionary. Some things are within our power, while others are not. Within our power are our opinion, aim, desire, aversion, and, in a word, our own actions. Not within our power are our body, property, reputation, position, and, in a word, all that are not our own actions. Your gallery presentation perfectly illustrates this principle. You controlled every aspect of your preparation, the quality of your work, the thoroughness of your research, the clarity of your presentation, the professionalism of your approach. You controlled your effort, your attitude, and your commitment to excellence. What you couldn't control was the gallery owner's decision, their current needs, their personal taste, or their business strategy. The Stoics discovered something that modern psychology now confirms. When you tie your sense of success to outcomes you can't control, you create unnecessary suffering and undermine your motivation for future efforts. But when you measure success by the effort you invest and the growth you experience, you become virtually unstoppable. Marcus Aurelius, who faced countless situations where his best efforts didn't produce the desired results, wrote in his journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He understood that focusing on outcomes is a recipe for frustration, while focusing on effort is a source of endless motivation. Let's reframe your gallery rejection through this lens. Your months of preparation weren't wasted. They were an investment in your craft. Your presentation skills improved. Your ability to articulate your vision has developed. Your professional network expanded. Your portfolio became stronger. Your confidence in discussing your work grew. All of these benefits exist regardless of the gallery's decision. More importantly, you demonstrated to yourself that you can commit to excellence even when the outcome is uncertain. You proved you can do the work without a guarantee of reward. You built what the Stoics called character strength, the ability to pursue virtue and excellence for their own sake. Seneca, who lost and rebuilt fortunes multiple times, understood this principle deeply. He wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. When one outcome doesn't materialize, it ends one possibility but begins others." Your gallery rejection might lead you to discover a better venue, develop a different style, or meet an even more suitable collaborator. Here's the daily practice that transforms how you approach any challenging endeavor. Before starting any important project, clearly separate what you control from what you don't. Write 2 lists. On the first, include everything you can influence through your effort, your preparation, your attitude, your work quality, your consistency. On the second, list everything outside your control, other people's decisions, market conditions, timing, competition. Then make a commitment. You will invest 100% of your energy in the first list and 0% of your mental energy worrying about the second list. You will measure your success entirely by how well you execute what's within your power. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent to outcomes. It means recognizing that the best way to influence outcomes is to focus completely on what you control. The artist who spends energy worrying about gallery politics has less energy for creating great art. The entrepreneur who obsesses over investor decisions has less focus on building a solid business. The ancient Stoics believed that this shift in focus creates what they called preferred indifference. You can prefer certain outcomes while remaining indifferent to whether you achieve them. You prefer the gallery acceptance, but you're not devastated by rejection. You prefer business success, but you're not defined by failure. Epictetus taught his students to approach every endeavor like an archer. The archer controls their stance, their aim, their release, and their practice. They cannot control the wind, the movement of the target, or the decisions of judges. The wise archer focuses entirely on perfect technique and lets the results take care of themselves. When you apply this to your Houston art career, everything changes. You create because creating is what you control and what brings you alive. You submit to galleries because submission is what you control and what creates opportunities. You prepare thoroughly because preparation is what you control and what develops your skills. But you don't create because galleries might accept you. You don't submit because success is guaranteed. You don't prepare because outcomes are certain. You do these things because they're within your power and because excellence in effort is its own reward. Try this practice immediately. Identify one area where you've been frustrated by outcomes beyond your control. Separate what you can influence from what you can't. Recommit to excellence in your effort while releasing attachment to specific results. When we focus on process over outcome, we're ready for the most important habit of all: honest self-examination without self-destruction. Habit 6. Examine your actions with honest compassion. Allow me to set the scene. You're an entrepreneur in Portland who's been running a small marketing consultancy for 2 years. Today, you lost your biggest client not because of market conditions or budget cuts, but because of a mistake you made. You promised a campaign launch date you couldn't deliver, got defensive when they expressed concerns, and handled their feedback poorly during what should have been a collaborative meeting. As you sit in your empty office after they terminated the contract, you're facing a moment that will determine your future growth or stagnation. Your inner voice starts its familiar attack. You're terrible at this. You always mess up important relationships. You're not cut out to be an entrepreneur. You should just give up and get a regular job. This internal criticism feels justified. After all, you did make real mistakes that had real consequences. But this self-flagellation serves no purpose except to make you feel worse while teaching you nothing about how to improve. Most people approach self-examination in one of two destructive ways. Either they avoid it entirely, making excuses and blaming external factors to protect their ego, or they engage in brutal self-criticism that destroys their confidence and motivation. The Stoics discovered a third way: honest compassion. Marcus Aurelius, who made mistakes that affected entire nations, developed a practice of examining his actions with the precision of a scientist and the gentleness of a caring friend. He wrote, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself. But being strict with yourself doesn't mean being cruel to yourself. It means holding yourself to high standards while treating yourself with the same kindness you'd show a good friend who was struggling." The key insight is this: self-criticism and self-examination are completely different activities. Self-criticism focuses on your identity. "I'm bad at this," creates shame and paralyzes action. Self-examination focuses on your behavior. "This approach didn't work," creates learning and motivates improvement. In your Portland office, honest compassion would sound like this: "I made specific mistakes in handling this client relationship. I overpromised on timing, which created unrealistic expectations. When they expressed concerns, I got defensive instead of listening. During our meeting, I focused on protecting my ego rather than solving their problems. These were choices I made, and I can learn from them to make better choices in the future." Notice the difference? Instead of attacking your identity as an entrepreneur, you're examining specific behaviors that can be changed. Instead of drowning in shame, you're gathering data for improvement. Instead of wanting to quit, you're motivated to develop better skills. Seneca, who faced political exile and financial ruin, practiced what he called evening review. Each night, he would examine his day not as a judge condemning a criminal, but as a teacher helping a student learn. He would ask, "What did I do well today? What could I have done better? What specific actions will I take differently tomorrow?" This practice requires what the Stoics called emotional regulation. When you examine your mistakes while flooded with shame, anger, or disappointment, you can't think clearly. You need to create emotional space between yourself and your actions so you can examine them objectively. Here's the daily practice that transforms self-examination from self-torture into self-improvement. Each evening, spend 10 minutes reviewing your day with honest compassion. Ask 3 specific questions. First, what actions did I take today that aligned with my values and goals? This isn't about stroking your ego, but about reinforcing positive patterns. Second, what actions today fell short of my standards, and why did I make those choices? Focus on specific behaviors, not character judgments. Instead of, I was lazy, ask, what prevented me from doing my workout, and how can I address those obstacles tomorrow? Third, what specific changes will I make tomorrow based on what I learned today? This moves you from analysis to action, from understanding to implementation. The Portland client loss becomes a masterclass in this approach. You acknowledge that you overpromised because you were anxious about losing the client and wanted to seem impressive. You recognize that you got defensive because criticism triggered your insecurity about being a new entrepreneur. You understand that you focused on protecting your ego because you hadn't developed the emotional skills to separate feedback about your work from attacks on your worth. With this understanding, you can make specific improvements. Create more realistic project timelines with buffer time, practice receiving feedback without defensiveness, and develop strategies for managing your emotional reactions during difficult conversations. Epictetus, who had experienced powerlessness as someone who had been enslaved, taught that no one can hurt you without your permission. When you examine your actions with honest compassion, you refuse to give your mistakes permission to destroy your self-worth. You learn from them without being crushed by them. This doesn't mean lowering your standards or making excuses for poor performance. The Stoics believed in rigorous self-examination precisely because they held themselves to high standards. But they understood that shame and self-attack actually lower performance by creating fear and paralysis. Marcus Aurelius faced this balance constantly as emperor. When his military strategies failed, when his political decisions backfired, when his personal relationships suffered, he could have either ignored his mistakes or destroyed himself with self-criticism. Instead, he examined his choices honestly, learned from his errors, and committed to better decisions without losing confidence in his ability to lead. The ancient Stoics discovered that honest compassion creates a positive feedback loop. The more kindly you treat yourself during self-examination, the more willing you become to examine yourself honestly. You stop avoiding difficult feedback because you know you won't attack yourself for receiving it. Try this practice tonight. Review your day with the 3 questions above. Notice your tendency toward either excuse-making or self-attack. Practice examining your actions with the same combination of honesty and kindness you'd offer a good friend who came to you for advice about similar challenges. When you examine yourself with honest compassion, you develop the emotional strength needed for the final habit that completes your character development. Habit 7. Judge yourself kindly, others even more so. Picture yourself as a nurse working the night shift at a busy Boston hospital. It's 2 a.m., you're exhausted from a 12-hour shift, and you're dealing with your most difficult patient, an elderly man who's been ringing his call button every 15 minutes with increasingly unreasonable demands. He's complained about the temperature, the noise, the food, and now he's insisting that you're not doing your job properly because his water pitcher isn't perfectly full. Your immediate reaction is frustration. You've been working non-stop, caring for 8 other patients, and this man seems determined to make your job miserable. It would be easy to judge him as entitled, demanding, or inconsiderate. You might find yourself thinking, some people are just impossible to please, or he has no idea how hard I'm working. But what if you chose to see this moment differently? What if, instead of judging this patient harshly, you practiced what Marcus Aurelius called the view from understanding? Marcus Aurelius, who dealt with senators who opposed him, generals who disappointed him, and citizens who criticized him, wrote, "Be like the rocky headland on which the waves constantly break. It stands firm, and round it the seething waters are laid to rest." He understood that other people's difficult behavior often says more about their pain than about their character. Your difficult patient isn't trying to ruin your night. He's scared, in pain, and feeling powerless in an unfamiliar environment. He can't control his medical condition, his treatment schedule, or even when he'll be able to go home. The only thing he can control is his call button, so he's using it to feel some sense of agency in a situation where he has almost none. This shift in perspective doesn't excuse inappropriate behavior, but it helps you respond with compassion rather than judgment. Instead of seeing him as your enemy, you see him as someone struggling with circumstances beyond his control. Instead of taking his complaints personally, you recognize them as expressions of his fear and frustration. The Stoics discovered something profound. When you judge others harshly, you create suffering for yourself, not for them. Your patient remains unaware of your internal criticism, but you carry the weight of your negative judgment throughout your shift. Your anger and frustration drain your energy and make your work more difficult without improving the situation in any way. Seneca, who navigated the complex politics of imperial Rome, understood that judging others harshly is a form of self-imposed suffering. He wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. When you end the habit of harsh judgment, you begin the practice of compassionate understanding." But here's the crucial insight. This habit starts with how you judge yourself. If you're constantly criticizing your own mistakes, attacking your own character, and setting impossible standards for your own behavior, you'll inevitably extend that same harsh judgment to others. You can't give what you don't have. You can't offer compassion to others if you're not practicing it with yourself. The Stoics taught a specific approach they called charitable interpretation. When someone behaves poorly, instead of assuming the worst about their character, you assume they're doing the best they can with their current understanding and circumstances. This doesn't mean being naive or failing to protect yourself from genuinely harmful people. It means choosing to see others through the lens of compassion rather than criticism. Apply this to your Boston hospital shift. When your patient complains for the 10th time, instead of thinking he's impossible, you might think he's struggling. When he criticizes your care, instead of getting defensive, you might respond with, "I can see you're having a difficult night. What can I do to help you feel more comfortable?" This approach transforms not just your patient's experience, but your own. Instead of spending your shift fighting internal battles against difficult people, you spend it practicing compassion. Instead of accumulating resentment that you carry home, you develop empathy that enriches your character. Epictetus, who understood suffering deeply from his own experience of enslavement, taught that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. When you listen to understand rather than to judge, you often discover that people's difficult behavior makes perfect sense given their circumstances. The ancient Stoics believed that everyone is fighting battles you know nothing about. Your patient might be worried about medical bills that could bankrupt his family. He might be grieving a recent loss or facing a frightening diagnosis. He might be dealing with chronic pain that makes everything more difficult. When you remember this, judgment transforms into compassion. Here's the daily practice that revolutionizes your relationships. Before judging anyone's behavior, ask yourself 3 questions. First, what circumstances might explain their actions? Second, how would I want to be treated if I were in their situation? Third, what would responding with compassion look like in this moment? This doesn't mean accepting abuse or failing to set boundaries. The Stoics were strong advocates for justice and appropriate consequences for harmful behavior. But they understood the difference between holding people accountable and attacking their character. Marcus Aurelius, despite being betrayed by trusted allies and criticized by ungrateful citizens, practiced this principle consistently. He wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they can't tell good from evil. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own. This perspective doesn't make you weak, it makes you strong. When you're not constantly judging others, you have more mental energy for positive action. When you're not carrying resentment, you're more creative and effective. When you practice compassion consistently, you become someone others trust and respect. Try this immediately. Identify one person whose behavior frustrates you. Practice charitable interpretation by considering what circumstances might explain their actions. Notice how this shift in perspective changes your emotional response and your ability to interact with them constructively. With all 7 habits working together, you're ready to create a character transformation plan that will serve you for life. You now possess 7 daily habits that have shaped the character of emperors, presidents, and countless individuals who built unshakable strength in the face of life's greatest challenges. These aren't just philosophical concepts. They're practical tools you can implement immediately to transform not just what you accomplish, but who you become. Think about the journey we've taken together. You've learned to choose action over comfort, understanding that wearing out is infinitely better than rusting out. You've discovered that every single choice either builds or erodes your character, making each decision a vote for who you're becoming. You've seen the power of embodying your values rather than just talking about them, and the wisdom that comes from learning something valuable from every person you meet. You've mastered the art of focusing on your effort while releasing attachment to outcomes, discovered how to examine yourself with honest compassion rather than destructive criticism, and developed the strength to judge yourself kindly while extending even more compassion to others. Theodore Roosevelt transformed from a sickly child into one of America's most dynamic leaders by embodying these principles. Marcus Aurelius guided the Roman Empire through its greatest challenges using this same character foundation. Epictetus found unshakable freedom even in slavery through these practices. These habits have been tested by history's most demanding circumstances and proven effective across centuries. Your character transformation doesn't require perfect implementation. It requires consistent practice. Start with one habit that resonates most strongly with you. Perhaps it's Roosevelt's commitment to wear out rather than rust out, or Marcus Aurelius's practice of examining your choices through the lens of character development. Maybe it's the daily discipline of learning from everyone you meet, or the liberation of focusing on effort rather than outcomes. The key is beginning today. Your character is being shaped by every choice you make, every response you give, every person you encounter. You can let these moments pass unconsciously, or you can use them deliberately to build the unshakable foundation that will serve you for life. Remember, the ancient Stoics didn't develop these habits to become perfect. They developed them to become strong. Every challenge you face is character training. Every difficult person you encounter is an opportunity to practice compassion. Every setback is a chance to demonstrate resilience. Every choice is a vote for who you're becoming. The 7 habits work together to create what the Stoics called inner citadel, a core of character that remains steady regardless of external circumstances. When you build this foundation, you become someone that life's challenges cannot break, someone that toxic people cannot diminish, someone that setbacks cannot defeat. These ancient principles have survived over 2,000 years because they work. They worked in the marble halls of Rome, and they will work in your modern life. You have everything you need to build unshakable character starting today. If these 7 habits have shown you a path to becoming unstoppable, subscribe to the Stoic Vivu channel for more ancient wisdom that transforms modern challenges. Like this video if it's given you tools for character development, and share it with someone who's ready to build the strength that comes from within. Your character transformation starts now. The ancient Stoics are your guides,